In a major development, the US Justice Department has charged 5 men who allegedly plotted a domestic terror attack at Sunday's UFC Freedom 250 event on the White House lawn. According to the FBI, the group planned to deploy drones armed with explosives to cause panic and force an evacuation. They used snipers to shoot high-value targets in the fleeing crowd. FBI Director Kash Patel said authorities learned of the threats on June 10th and launched a multi-state operation, leading to arrests in Ohio, Missouri, Nebraska, and California over the weekend.
It was a serious threat. We take all threats of a large nature very seriously, and we investigate them until we can validate 100% that it's no longer a threat. It was an active plot, and it's ongoing.
Can you talk a little bit more about what they were planning?
They were planning to attack the Freedom 250. Some of what you read this morning's accurate. I'm not going to get into too many details because, like I said, this is still an active, ongoing investigation. Just because we're done with Freedom 250 or that particular event doesn't mean we're going to stop. There are still suspects at large, and we're going to work it until everyone's been identified. I'd say it was unique due to the numbers involved, the level of planning involved. Thankfully, our advanced threat interdiction unit got on top of it very early, involved partners. You know, working these cases is a whole of government. They don't happen in a bubble. But it was an active plot, yes, involving purported claim to be planned to use drones, snipers, etc. I'm not going to comment on how many involved because, like I said, it still is an active investigation. I will tell you that we've seen a significant increase in threat cases. We're up 40% this year in threat cases. You may have noticed, or the city may have noticed, some pretty extreme security measures, road closures that were maybe more than normal. Those were largely due to our great partners at MPD and the mayor's office that we have to work with in order to execute the overall security plan. We did a lot, and we're 100% confident that we knew locations, level of planning, level of response. The event itself, I am confident in saying, was never at risk due to the great investigative work.
Over in Evian, France, the US-Iran deal is dominating discussions at the ongoing G7 summit. In a bilateral meeting with UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, US President Donald Trump told reporters he would disclose the full contents of the peace agreement sometime after Friday, once the Strait of Hormuz is completely open. However, he went on to reveal several key details of the deal.
So much interest in the text of the document. Why not release the document?
Oh, I will.
Why not release it?
Well, because I'd like to get a formal setting first before we do that. But I have no problem with that. It's a good document. Here's what it says. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. That's what it says. It won't have one. To buy, to develop, they will not have a nuclear weapon. And I would say that's about 99.9% of what I wanted, because we couldn't let that happen. You couldn't let that happen. And they won't have a nuclear weapon. Now, in addition to that, the Strait is going to be open toll-free. And it's toll-free beyond the 60 days. It's not, somebody said, oh, it's toll-free for... No. It's toll-free, period. When it opens permanently, it'll be toll-free. I want to congratulate our Navy because the naval blockade was unbelievable. But I'll not only release it, I'll probably have a press conference and read it to you word by word so that the press covers it accurately, because it's a very important document.
Iranian leaders also publicly confirmed that an agreement has been reached, with Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi stating on Tuesday that the war is over. However, the militant group Hezbollah remains a point of concern. Araghchi stressed that the memorandum of understanding reached between the US and Iran reportedly requires an immediate and permanent end to the war on all fronts, including Lebanon. President Trump has since called on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to act more responsibly in Lebanon. He urged the Prime Minister to balance Israel's national security needs with restraint, warning that further major strikes on Hezbollah could risk undermining the broader peace deal.
We've had a very effective relationship. Without us, without the United States, there would be no Israel. Without me, there would be no Israel, because no other president was willing to do what I did. I've had a great relationship with Bibi, but now Bibi has to be more responsible with respect to Lebanon. Lebanon used to be a great country. It was a country where you had professors, doctors, lawyers. The great intellect was in Lebanon. Now it's terrible. I would say of all countries, they've been treated the worst. And they can't defend themselves. And they have Hezbollah, which is a problem for them. So, no, I'm not happy with the way Israel has handled themselves with Lebanon and with Hezbollah. They should have been able to do the job faster. It just goes on forever. And when that happens, it throws a negative light on the big deal, and that's the deal with Iran. So when you ask me about Bibi, an unbelievable relationship. But Israel would have been blown up a long time ago had I not gotten involved. Two things I did. I terminated the Iran nuclear deal. Barack Hussein Obama sold out Israel for Iran. He went to Iran. He sold them out. How anybody can vote for this guy or the party, the Democrats I call them, because they're dumb. They're dumb people. That's number one. How anybody can vote for them. And the second was the B-2 bombers, just totally destroyed.
One thing that's clear, oil prices are responding positively to the US-Iran agreement. Prices dropped sharply within hours of the announcement, falling 4 to 5%, with Brent crude trading between $79 and $81 per barrel, hitting a 3-month low. Further drops are expected once the deal is formally signed in Switzerland on Friday and the Strait is fully reopened. And as President Trump noted yesterday, once fuel prices go down, so does the cost of everything else.
And we're doing really well, and now you're going to see prices coming down. You know, when I took over, prices were very high. We had the worst inflation in the history of our country. Prices were high, eggs were high, bacon was high, everything was high. And the first question I got asked, what about affordability? I did a news conference one day after I took over, and these people said, what about affordability? I said, I didn't cause it, but I'm bringing it down. And now with the fuel going way down, you saw yesterday it went down $6, $7. With fuel going down, as goes fuel, so goes everything. I've always seen that, right? Fuel, you're in a very good business. Because as goes fuel, so goes everything. Fuel is dropping. It's now in the 70s per barrel. And I think we'll get it down. When I was in Iowa, and we had great victories in Iowa. And when I left, I noticed in a gas station, $1.85 a gallon. That's where we were. It's a little bit higher generally, but I saw two stations, $1.85, one had $1.91. And, you know, we're going to get around those levels. So.
The G7 summit has also seen Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in attendance, with the Russia-Ukraine war top of the agenda. During yesterday's multilateral working session, G7 leaders discussed peace efforts, including further sanctions on Russia, with Presidents Trump and Zelensky describing talks as very good and positive. The US president urged Russian President Vladimir Putin to make a deal and end the tragic loss of life on both sides.
On Sunday, Ushakov, following the conversation between Putin and Trump, said that he was expecting a visit by Witko and Kushner to Moscow. Are there any dates? Indeed, there was talk that American negotiators would come soon, but there are no exact dates yet. You know, the Americans are still preparing for the signing of the memorandum that was agreed. We know that at the end of this week, this signing is scheduled in Switzerland. After that, it will probably be said that they will be able to fly to Moscow. As soon as the date is agreed, we will let you know. Zelensky said that he offered Putin to meet at the Big Seven summit, which is now taking place in the French Air Force. Was there an official invitation via official channels? Of course, there was not. And there are no official channels between Moscow and Kiev, as you know. There were none. You know that Zelensky was told and offered everything. It was said and repeated several times that if Zelensky is ready to speak responsibly and seriously, the Kiev regime is well aware of what it is about, then he can always come to Moscow, where he will be received.
Stay tuned to the Love World Networks for more international developments. The European Union has alleged that the Chinese military has been training Russian military personnel to fight in Ukraine. Following a EU foreign ministers meeting in Luxembourg earlier this week, Vice President of the European Commission, Kaja Kallas, noted that the EU has verified the claims and described China as a decisive enabler of Russia's war effort.
And lastly, on China, from distorting subsidies, growing trade imbalances, and a near monopoly of critical raw materials, the list of issues remains long. Reducing dependencies with China won't be easy or cheap, but it's necessary and urgent. Some member states have called on the EU to use our trade tools more forcibly. Today, ministers focused on the foreign and security aspects of our relations with China. Beijing remains a decisive enabler of Russia's war against Ukraine, and in response, we sanctioned several Chinese entities today. We have also now verified reports that the Chinese military has been training Russian military personnel to fight in Ukraine. We are carefully assessing the implications. Furthermore, ministers discussed countering China's disinformation activities and strengthening European defense supply chains. On the Indo-Pacific, ministers reaffirmed that the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea clearly defines lawful conduct and serves as a foundation for security in the region. All those issues require pragmatic dialogue with Beijing. There was unity among ministers that we will defend European interests.
China was quick to respond to the accusations, with its foreign ministry spokesperson Lin Jian rejecting the claims during the ministry's daily press briefing on Tuesday.
The EU High Representative for Diplomacy and Security said yesterday that the EU has verified reports that China has been training Russian military personnel to fight in Ukraine. Do you have any comment on the report?
The remarks have no factual basis and are pure vilification and smears.
We'll be back shortly after the break with more global developments.
There are moments in life that are too big to miss. Moments that change everything. With the journey taking us far and wide, we end up miles apart from the ones we love. Yet, even in those times, we find ways to be together. Because when a moment is truly important, distance becomes nothing but a number. Use King's Conference and let your influence span the globe. With 1,000 participants in a single room, there's no telling how far your message can go.
Over in the United Kingdom, the Labour Party is facing severe criticism following the resignation of 3 of its top Defence Ministry officials. On Tuesday, former Defence Minister John Healey and former Minister of the Armed Forces Colonel Alistair Cairns delivered their resignation speeches in the House of Commons, exposing the failure of Prime Minister Keir Starmer's government to properly fund the UK's military. Healy noted that the nation's defence plan falls well short of what is required, stating that no date has been set for UK defence spending to reach 3% of GDP. Meanwhile, Al Carnes' address confirmed that the Labour government doesn't have the backs of hard-working British citizens, particularly military veterans.
And the decisions that we make in the months ahead will be judged by those who follow us. At this dangerous time, I see the current defence investment plans falling well short of what is required. A rise of 0.08% from next year to 2030, no date for reaching 3%, no path to 3.5%. By 2030, well over half of NATO members will be spending 3% or more. And when allies are looking for British leadership, we must not fall behind. When NATO needs European nations to step up, we must not fall short. Our adversaries don't follow timetables set by the Treasury. I appreciate how hard this is for Cabinet colleagues, and I'm very grateful to those who support what's required.
And while the Labour government is facing a defence budget crisis, Member of Parliament and leader of Restore Britain, Rupert Lowe, has released the independent rape gang inquiry. Tuesday's report exposes what is arguably the biggest scandal in modern history, estimating that dating back to the 1950s, at least 250,000 young, mainly white British girls have been victims of systematic grooming, rape, trafficking, violence, and torture by organized gangs. Cases span at least 149 local authority districts, about 40% of the UK, with a report highlighting that the vast majority of convicted group-based offenders in these cases are men of Pakistani Muslim heritage.
This report is over 200 pages long, and it goes into the root causes of probably the most extensive, widespread scandal that has ever beset Britain. It goes to every corner of the country. It's not in silos, it's everywhere. And it involves failure by the British establishment. And by the British establishment, I mean obviously government ministers, the civil service, local government, social services, the police, the judiciary, the NHS, and the media, who is supposed to be the guardian for the British people of scandals like this, but they've singularly failed to do that. The report goes into the reasons how it's happened. It goes into the reasons why it's happened, and that is all the reasons, and we analyse everything. I'm very grateful to all of the experts who appeared, all of the survivors who were brave enough to appear. We will be pursuing those people who have failed us. There will be private prosecutions. To put things into context, this report, which was funded by 20,000 concerned citizens who gave as much as they could afford, it raised £600,000. The Jay inquiry alone cost the taxpayer £186 million. We still have funds left to help us to pursue private prosecutions and to start the process of prosecuting those people who have failed us. We're also intent on naming those people in Parliament, where we're not going to prejudice a legal case, so that everybody knows those people who are responsible, who should have dealt with this, but failed to deal with it.
In response to the report, Britons are now calling for mass protests across the UK this Saturday, June 20th, demanding justice for the victims. The 219-page document revealed that authorities at every level, including the police, social services, health services, schools, licensing bodies, and politicians knew the patterns of these rape gangs, possessed the intelligence, and still failed to protect the country's children, calling it one of the most horrendous failures in the history of the country. Dutch activist Eva Vlaardingerbroek described the scandal as the ultimate betrayal and called for those responsible to pay.
So we have just released the Rape Gang Inquiry report, and I suggest that every single person goes ahead and reads over 200 pages detailing how Pakistani rape gangs have operated across Britain. Now, it's a harrowing read, but it's a necessary read to give you an idea as to what we're dealing with in this country. Demographic replacement, the mass rape of working class white girls, the influx of savages that have been allowed into our nation for no good reason, contributed nothing, but instead raped our women and girls. Now just remember, the Labour Party, of course, have barely addressed this. Farage said that he would do his own inquiry. He didn't do it. Do you know who did? It was Rupert Lowe. If you want to see proper justice, if you actually want to see change in this country, if you actually want to address these heinous, vile, disgusting acts that have been perpetrated against these white working class girls, then get behind Restore Britain. Read the document. We need to deport and remove millions of people from this country.
Amid the uproar, Keir Starmer's government is attempting to further strengthen government control over online speech. Liz Kendall, Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology, announced on Tuesday that the Labour government is planning on expanding restrictions under the social media ban for children, such as overnight online curfews for 16 and 17-year-olds. Big tech giant and free speech activist Elon Musk has stated that this censorship law is a wolf in sheep's clothing, with a real goal of enabling the UK government to track everyone.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we also want to address concerns about a cliff edge when you turn 16, an age when many young people should be especially focused on their futures and on exams. So I can today announce live streaming and stranger communication, including in gaming, will be switched off by default for 16 and 17-year-olds. I am also strongly minded to bring in default overnight curfews and breaks in infinite scrolling for 16 and 17-year-olds, and I will set out further details once our pilot schemes are finished in my statement next July, in July. Madam Deputy Speaker, I know that not everybody supports a ban, and I have listened really carefully to those concerns, and I want to take each in turn. First, we've seen in Australia that many children will try and succeed in getting around a ban. I think that is inevitable when social media has been such an integral part of their lives. So we will introduce more highly effective age assurance measures to better support compliance, and I have asked Ofcom to share proposals on this within months. However, I want to be clear to parents and to members of this House that our ban is as much about helping future generations and resetting social norms in future as it is about young people today.
Let's take a recap of today's headlines. The US Justice Department has charged 5 individuals over a domestic terror plot planned for the UFC Freedom 250 event held on Sunday.
They were planning to attack the Freedom 250. Some of what you read this morning's accurate. I'm not going to get into too many details because, like I said, this is still an active, ongoing investigation.
The US-Iran deal has sent oil prices to a 3-month low, dismissing global fuel crisis concerns.
I've had a great relationship with Bibi, but now Bibi has to be more responsible with respect to Lebanon.
UK MP Rupert Lowe has released the independent Rape Gang Inquiry, exposing reportedly the biggest scandal in modern history.
This report is over 200 pages long. and it goes into the root causes of probably the most extensive, widespread scandal that has ever beset Britain.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer's government pushes for expanded online control under the social media ban for minors.
So I can today announce live streaming and stranger communication, including in gaming, will be switched off by default for 16 and 17-year-olds. I am also strongly minded to bring in default overnight curfews and breaks in infinite scrolling for 16 and 17-year-olds.
And with that, we conclude the midday edition of the news for today. My name is Marika Schroeder, and this is Alan 24 International, reporting news that is truth, the pulse of trusted analysis. Goodbye.